ones were alive and endured hell underground for 330 days, and then were executed by their Hamas captors as they probably heard Israeli troops operating in the area, and they executed the hostages and then fled.
We've been careful on this channel when we talk about the protests in Israel, the protests which we called very clearly pro-Hamas protests. I think I absolutely stand behind that statement. But we've been careful to criticize protesters, the media that promotes that agenda, and politicians who obviously capitalize on it, but to avoid talking about hostage families, because in their grief and in their obvious concern for what's going on, we can understand that different things would that they would do whatever they think is possible to save their loved ones. Today, we are departing from that policy to some extent. Now, I say to some extent because this episode really was inspired by a specific Twitter account that I've seen pop up. It's at All Hostages, and it's titled "We Are All Hostages." It's a Twitter account that claims in its bio, let me look at the bio. It says, "We're a group of hostage families in Israel demanding our government do a deal. Supporting us means calling to end the war." And I've looked at they have a link tree there. They have different links. They don't have a website. They don't say who exactly they are, as far as I could tell. But most of what you see there is usually from first of all, not direct, like not parents or it's usually cousins and so on. But it is very, very clearly a in effect, if not in intention, a pro-Hamas Twitter account. It goes after anybody who supports Israel winning the war, and it states clearly in its bio, we want to end the war. End the war means end the war now, not end it in victory, but end it, as they say in their bio, in a deal. A deal means we give Hamas whatever they think is enough for them to decide to stop the war and supposedly release the hostages alive, although, of course, there's no guarantee for that either. This is really going so far in Israel that I think this will be studied when the demise of Israel is studied as a pivotal moment where an enemy attacked, the government refused to fight back immediately, and then as time went on and the government did decide to fight, but incompletely, resolve among the population weakened and got to the point where they are actually supporting the enemy. I mean, Hamas knows exactly what it's doing. Hamas executing those hostages, those 6 hostages, had an intention beyond killing those hostages, and it was achieved perfectly. They saw the people of Israel, many of the people of Israel, go out to the streets and say, this is the moment where we are fully siding with Hamas after they execute hostages. So anyway, that is what we are going to discuss today, this specific Twitter account and generally the battle of some of the relatives of some of the hostages to give Hamas a complete victory in this war. Welcome to the Daily Objective. I'm joined by James Valiant. James, your thoughts on this?
Well, I'd start with their title, "We Are All Hostages." What's perverse about it is that we are all potential hostages. And if you look at it that way, zeroing in on the specific lives of these hostages and not out of the context of all of the people who've been killed in the years before, all of the people who might be killed and taken hostage in the future, That would be the mistake. Governments have to defend all of their citizens, to recognize Hamas, to deal with Hamas at all. But is bad enough. You'd be already morally sanctioning the future taking of more hostages for the sake of saving these hostages. They are in, I don't want to be cruel to the hostage families who say this, but they are demanding the death of other people to rescue their loved one. They are demanding, requiring, insisting that other people die so that their loved one can be rescued. That is the moral situation. Now, as I say, if it was my wife, I do place her life above all other lives on this planet. Well, she's my wife. I would be like one of these people trying to get in to Gaza, one of these protesters. I admit it. I know it. But I hope I would be able to step back, stop, think, and say, I cannot require other people to die, other people to be taken hostage. I will not put other people through what I am going through right now just to get my loved one back home. How many other people is your loved one worth? How many people do you want to die so that you can get your loved one home? Now, that's the kind of hard reality we're talking about here. The hard reality to give in to Hamas's current demands, releasing terrorists who may have been involved in October 7th, to open up the corridor with Egypt, to allow the resupply and the escape more October 7ths. You're saying, okay, so I can get my loved one back, I'm willing for us to endure more October 7ths. Think, people. Think what they're doing. They are demanding the survival of killers. They are demanding the resupply of the people who did October 7th in exchange for their loved one. That is, in effect, saying others have to be kidnapped, tortured, mutilated, and die so that I get my loved one back. No, That is not a rational moral calculation.
Thank you, Tom, for becoming a member of the YouTube channel. Thank you, Bonnie, for the super chat, and thank you, Wes, for the super chat. I mentioned a few days ago, sometimes in preparation of a show, especially if it's about something that's in the news in Israel, I just turn on the news in Israel, just watch randomly any Israeli channel where there's the news, or move between one and the others. And I did that again today. And every single time they have somebody who is a relative of a hostage. And whenever they have relatives of hostages, it is always relatives of hostages who demand a deal, who demand capitulation. One of the things they're doing now is they're showing the videos. Hamas, recorded the hostages that they executed before they executed them. And if you see any of those videos, they are using the language that is used by protesters. Now, remember, these videos are released by Hamas. Hamas, and anything they say, if they say, we think Israel should fight, and we hope we don't get killed, but we think this is the right thing to do, to fight until Hamas is defeated. Do you think Hamas would release that video? No, Hamas releases the videos that they think would have a certain effect. And again, these people, these useful idiots, these specific relatives of some of the hostages are playing right into Hamas's hands. So as I scroll through this Twitter account, there's a post from 6 hours ago. It says, "This Sunday, come meet us to know what you can do to help the hostage families get a deal and end the war." And there's a poster there for a Zoom call, and the poster says, "Americans must answer the call from the hostage families. Ceasefire is the only way to bring them home and let Gaza live." When you are in agreement on a matter relating to this war with Iran, with Hamas, with every single enemy that Israel has, that is a reason to maybe question where you're standing on this. But these people don't question. Again, these people, you don't see them criticizing Israel's enemies. You see them criticizing Israel's leadership, not in the way that we criticize Israel's leadership, but in the way that Israel's enemies criticize Israel's leadership. They criticize anybody who's supporting Israel winning this war. They are, in every way, shape, or form, they are agents, if not, official agents. They are in effect agents of the enemy. In the reality show that follows this show, we're going to be talking about the story with Russia paying some people, some right wingers in American media to promote certain ideas. And here we have people in Israel who, we have no reason to believe are paid by Israel's enemies. They're doing that for free. They're doing that, they're volunteering to support Israel's enemies in their stated goal of exterminating the Jews and eliminating the state of Israel.
If we could get all the hostages back by, giving Iran a nuclear weapon, would that be worth it? If we could get all the hostages back by, releasing every single person in Israeli custody who we know was involved in October 7th, would that be worth it? Would it be worth it if let's say, Hamas has very inferior rockets to Hezbollah? Would it be worth it to give Hamas, those high precision, high powered missiles such as Hezbollah has? Would that be worth it? Give Hamas, more sophisticated weaponry. Would that be worth it? Because then you'd really see it very plainly. And even they in their own minds would have to confront the reality that they're demanding other people die so that their loved one can get home. But that is what they're doing. And let me repeat that. Let that sink in here. If this is the policy they're demanding, caving into Hamas, the survival of Hamas, the opening of that corridor, the releasing of terrorists, why not just give Hamas why not give Hamas a nuclear weapon to get your loved ones home? Just how many lives is your loved one worth it? How many lives are you willing to take to get your loved one home? That is the moral calculation. It is repulsive. I will not bargain in human flesh. And I will not bargain with people like Hamas who perpetrate October 7th. That is the obscenity that they're demanding. I can totally psychologically understand their position. But the way I am putting it has to be the moral clarity that the governments involved have to take to this. Israel has to be able to say, America has to be able to say, I'm sorry for your loved one. Hamas are monsters. They did a horrible thing to your loved one, but I'm sorry, we cannot allow others, innocent people, to be raped and mutilated and killed and taken hostage because your loved one was. And that's what you're demanding of us.
So I'm gonna read another tweet. So they're quote tweeting a tweet by Tablet Magazine of an article. Now, I haven't read this article. I am familiar with Tablet Magazine. They often have good takes on things, and from this tweet, it seems like this article might also be that. The tweet says, "Bring them home is bringing us to the brink. Empty slogans and misbegotten promises are designed to cause civil war. Don't let them," writes Liel, the person who wrote it. So they are quote tweeting it by saying, "Absolutely vile article designated to pit the diaspora against the hostage families in Israel. Don't listen to the lies of the people who support this. Instead of following bring them home now." And the majority of Israelis want a deal, not a civil war. Now, okay, there's a lot in there. Majority of Israelis might want a deal. I think that's probably not incorrect. That doesn't mean that they are right in this. That means just that people aren't principled. People are motivated by emotions. On October 7th, October 8th, they were motivated by the emotion of wiping Gaza off the map, or doing at least taking very serious military action in Gaza. And now they're motivated by a different emotion, which is we need to do everything to get the hostages back. Everything meaning as you mentioned, sacrificing the lives of future hostages, of future victims of terrorist attacks. So this is what this is the demand here, and this is also a thing that that this Twitter account does a lot, which is any voices from outside of Israel that support Israel, they have a specific opposition to them, a sort of how dare you foreigners tell us what's right for us. Well, the thing is, people behind this Twitter account, you clearly don't know what's right for you. You don't know what's right even for the hostages, by the way. Hostages have been rescued in rescue operations, and if Hamas is now executing them, Israel can also reverse course and say, you know what, here is a random square mile of land in Gaza. Nobody can live there. Like nobody who's there right now will be alive within 30 minutes. And we're going to randomly pick such a square mile somewhere in Gaza every single time until a hostage comes back. There's different things that could be done. And you could be advocating for that. Instead of advocating for the people who took the hostages in the first place, you could be advocating for their defeat, for the death of those terrorists. And yeah, unfortunately, you are, again, taking their side.
I hate to cite again that, the films they made, I think Glenn Ford was in the original and Mel Gibson made a remake of Ransom. What's extraordinary is it's the father of the kidnapped victim who refuses to negotiate. The one person you might think would, I'll do anything to get my son back. But he didn't. He turned it completely around. He threatened them. If you don't get you're not going to get the ransom. If you don't give me my son back, y'all is going to start dying. And of course, that causes them to turn on each other. And in the end, he gets his son back and the bad guys all get killed or arrested. Wow. The truth is, and what's extraordinary about that is that it's actually the father of the kidnapped victim who takes that stand, something I would psychologically not imagine most people could do. But governments have to be like that. Governments have to say, you've taken some hostages. Oh, and you want something back for them? No, y'all are going to start dying, and the dying will not stop until you get our hostage back. Okay? You're not going to gain anything. What is so perverse is that after these hostages, just after Israel is working in the area, they're afraid these hostages are about to get rescued, and so they execute them with bullets to the back of the head. And in the wake of half a dozen executions on the part of Hamas, people are saying, oh, now make any deal with them. Well, at that point, it's as stark as what I just said. It's as stark as how I have put it, ladies and gentlemen. You are demanding other people be put at risk of mutilation, rape, torture, being taken hostage again. Is that the price you're going to demand for your loved one? That's literally what we're looking at. At this point, there's no other way of seeing the situation. These people were brutally executed by Hamas rather than the possibility of them being liberated by the IDF. That's the kind of monster you're dealing with. You cannot negotiate with these monsters. To negotiate with such monsters is to betray every civilized value. I'm sorry, I know I'm speaking rather intensely and emotionally, but these loved ones cannot hold governments hostage. The loved ones of the hostages are asking that the Israeli government and the Israeli people, the American government and the American people be held hostages. So yeah, we are all hostages, potential hostages of Hamas. And that is precisely why we cannot ever negotiate with Hamas, much less even consider these outrageous demands. No, it's obscene to a point that they're literally demanding other people die for their loved one. And I hate to do it, but when they're getting in your face, when they're putting out websites saying, you are the bad guys, no. I have to get back in their face and say, how many other people are you demanding die for your loved one? It's that stark.
Yeah. Yesterday on the reality show, we talked about Bassem Youssef. We showed parts of his appearance on Piers Morgan on October 17th. And one of the things he says early on in that appearance, and of course he's a comedian, and that's what he was doing on the show. He was ridiculing ideas that are opposite his, rather than actually expressing any clear view and explanation of why his views are right. But yeah, he said at some point, I don't want to, anybody who calls for a ceasefire will be labeled a terrorist sympathizer. And when we did our commentary, I said, yes, if you call for a ceasefire after Hamas slaughters 1,200 Jews, takes 250 hostages, and says very clearly, we will do this again and again until there is no Israel. Then if you call for a ceasefire when Hamas is unable to do an October 7th again and again because they need to regroup and rearm, then yes, calling for a ceasefire makes you a terrorist sympathizer. That's what Bassem Youssef was on October 17th. That's what the Israeli protesters are today when they are blocking the roads in demand, in response to the execution of hostages, demand to capitulate to the desires and the demands of the executioners.
So would it make better sense for Hamas to start executing earlier? We'll just start executing some every week or every month so that until you guys, then these protesters are really screamed because we really should have capitulated, 11 months ago. Okay. What the hell are they asking? It's really that clear. And yes, I'm sorry, Mr. Comedian, you are a Hamas supporter. You are overtly supporting Hamas, insisting they survive, stay alive, that we negotiate with them, sanction them as a valid partner, and in the immediate wake of their brutal execution of innocent hostages. I'm sorry, it disgusts me to the core, and I'm sure our listeners can hear it. But frankly, they are demanding the morally repulsive position. They are demanding that other people die so that their loved one get released. And we have to state it that clearly at this point, as they get in our face, making demands about the hostages. I have to come right back into their face and ask just how many people are worth the death of how many people are worth their loved one, because that is the calculus they're forcing on us. That is what they're demanding.
Thank you, Gail and Bonnie, for the super chats. So Lisa says in the chat, I live in the center of Israel. Trust me, the majority do not support the protests. It was just an emotional outcry. Well, I've seen polls where the majority support a deal, which is bad enough, even if you're not, blocking the roads. Which, right. By the way, these protests, are as always happens with protests. They report themselves as hundreds of thousands of people. It was probably in the tens of thousands and not many tens, but still, that is terrifying. Tens of thousands of people choosing to go to Tel Aviv to block the roads, block the freeways, is saying something. If it's tens of thousands there are many more who support it and who aren't there. And it doesn't need to be a majority one way or another. The fact that there is such a big chunk of the population who is openly in, supporting the enemy in a time of war, it does give aid and comfort to the enemy. That shows the enemy that there's a real good chance here. Remember, October 7th, we don't know if it was necessarily done because, at the time that it was because of the, political turmoil over the judicial reform. But we know that couldn't have hurt. As far as Hamas was concerned, the fact that every Saturday and some additional days, the streets were filled with people protesting, demanding the removal of the government, and so on, and of course the fact that both sides of this argument were not really making sense, was probably.
Razi, how we know that Israel is the one Western civilized government in the area? They're making all the same mistakes that happened in London and New York, right? So the protesters can block the streets. There's no moral clarity when it comes to war and these savage monsters. Yes, Israel to a lesser degree, because they're currently the victims of this brutality. Yes, but in essence, it's the same as it is in Britain and the United States. A lack of moral clarity, altruism paralyzing them, cultural and moral relativism paralyzing them, a lack of conceptual long-term thinking. Yeah, and protests in the street that apparently have a right to block traffic. Yeah, Israel shows all the classic signs, I'm afraid, of being a contemporary Western, quote, civilized democracy. Just like in London, just like in New York, there's no moral clarity, and there's people who are thinking in a non-conceptual, certainly non-long-term way, making irrational emotional demands and blocking traffic in the process. Yeah, I'm afraid Israel is very much like America and Britain.
Viv from Ireland, thank you for being a member for 6 months. Viv says, I didn't realize Bassem Youssef was a comedian. Makes sense now, kind of. Yeah, I mean, I was saying yesterday, so many comedians seem to be, taking this the pro-Hamas side. We mentioned Dave Smith, who we were going to talk about today, but I think there's a more pressing story, so we'll talk about him at some later time. We talked about John Oliver earlier this week. The few things I've seen from what's his name? Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart is also taking the pro-Hamas line. How comedians, do they know what happens if you make a joke about the leadership in the kind of country that Hamas wants to replace Israel with? I don't know, but it doesn't seem to bother them. Gail says Nazi sympathizers keep crawling out of the corners. Yeah, and they're less and less ashamed of the fact they're Nazi sympathizers. They seem to, not hide as much as they used to behind, their actual views. Akira says watching people arguing over religious ancestry is hilarious. I find it pretty scary, but yeah.
Yeah, that kind of ancient tribalist mysticism, collectivism stuff. Yeah, that's really the frightening cause of the jihadist attitude. That's the dominant idea in the Islamic world today. I mean, yeah, that's scary, frightening. And those of us who defend Israel and civilization should not use them at all. We sure do not. But Gail, you're exactly right and well put. Nazis, yeah, Nazi sympathizers. That's what we're looking at. It is becoming ever so much more stark and clear. I mean, what if you could devise? It's horrific when we're talking about human lives here, but if you could devise a laboratory experiment to show the mental corruption, could anything have done so more? In the wake of the horrors of October 7th, the kind of reaction, disgusting moral appeasement and reaction that we're getting, the short-term anti-conceptual thinking, the moral confusion, the pacifism, altruism, and moral relativism that's dominating these people. Yeah. It's like as stark as can be now. They're demanding the death of other innocents so that they can get their loved ones home. I'm going to say it like that now. Have to.